Hi everybody, it's Julessa, and this week's project is a pair of earrings. We're going to be using porcupine quills because that's the found object that I have, but you can use any found object that you have, or you can go out hunting if you want to look for something. You can use feathers, you can use sticks, you can use leaves, you can use rocks, whatever you can find. The whole purpose of this project is to show you how to make the end cap in order to hang them from a pair of earrings. So let's get to the bench. First, I want to show you the materials that I'm going to be using today. First, I have a small coil of jump rings. These are probably about 3.5 to 4 millimeters, maybe 5 millimeters in diameter, outside diameter. These are going to be used to attach the tubes to the actual ear wire. Then I also have a piece of tubing here, and this tubing is going to be cut to create the seats, or basically the setting for some porcupine quills that I have from my grandmother. You can see those here. Now these little guys are pretty darn sharp, so I'm going to cut off the tips because I found with another pair of earrings that I made that because I have long hair, the porcupine quills would get all tangled up in my hair, so I'm going to cut these little tips off because they have barbs on the end of them and they grab onto your hair and then you can't, they get all tangled up in your hair, and that's kind of defeats the purpose of wearing a pair of earrings, right? And then the last thing we're going to use is this small piece of silver. This is one that I've rolled out on my own, made from scrap. We're going to cut a little portion off of this to use it because we don't have to use very much of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my tube cutter, which is this little jig right here, and I'm going to set it up to the length of the tube that I'd like to have. And I don't want the tube to be too long, so I'm going to kind of eyeball where I want it. It's actually kind of set up where I'd like to have it, so I'm going to go ahead and stick it right there. This way I can get two sections of tubing that are pretty much the same size. They won't be exact because of course I'm going to have to file them flat to make sure that they can get the cap on the top of them, but at least they'll be visually the same. So I'm going to take my jeweler saw, put some burr lube on it, and cut this tube. I'm going to cut two pieces. The beauty of the tube cutting jig is that I can get two equally sized pieces that will be pretty similar, and I don't have to fiddle with holding on to the tube and trying to cut all at the same time. If you don't have one of these tubing jigs, you can do the same thing by using your calipers to mark it and then just take your jeweler saw on the mark and cut it. And tubing's kind of small, so I'm using tweezers to pull it out of my jig. Okay, so we've got the two pieces cut. Now what I'm going to do is take some sandpaper on a sanding stick and just smooth off the bottom edges where I'm going to be soldering it to a back plate. I want to get the little burr that the saw created off the edge because that will prevent the solder from flowing. So I'm sanding it flat, and then I'm kind of doing a beveled edge just to get that little bit of a kerf that was left on the edge off of it. So those are the two sides that I sanded. And as you can see here, this is pretty small pieces. So this piece is going to be ginormous. So I'm going to actually cut it to make it smaller so it'll be easier to solder. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it in two separate pieces to make my life just a little bit easier. Okay, so now I have my two pieces. So I'm going to solder like this, and then we're going to cut off the excess once we get the solder joints completed. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 jump rings for each earring. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 jump rings off of this coil. The coil is a little bit small, so it's make it a little bit more difficult to cut this last one off. There we go. There's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to close 2 of the jump rings because these are the ones that are going to be soldered to the end cap of my setting here. So I'm going to go ahead and close those and then solder them closed at the same time I'm soldering the rest of the pieces, and then I'll loop through the open rings and solder those closed as well. There's 2 of them. So the next step is to solder both of these to the bottom caps, or what I call the top caps of my earring post. Well, it's not, the post is actually going to be, it's going to be a fish hook, not a post. So we're actually going to solder the tubing to the back plates, and then we'll solder the 2 rings closed and cut out the back plate so that we just have the tubing with the back plate on it, and then we'll solder the 2 rings to the top of the back plate. So first thing I'm going to do is flux my sheet and my tubing. I'm going to use hard solder to solder the back plate on, and I'm going to put 2 pieces of solder on each one of these. Get my solder pick ready. I'm going to light my torch, make sure I have an adequate sized flame. I don't want it too big because I don't want to melt my tubing, but I also don't want it too small and have it take too long to heat up. So that's about the right size. I'm going to start by heating the outer side of the back plate because it's going to bubble and move around. And my solder is going to kind of go all over the place. Until my solder gets kind of gooey, I'm going to wait and move my flux gets kind of gooey. I'm going to wait and move my solder once the flux is gooey. There we go. Now I'm going to concentrate my heat on the back plate and not on the tubing because it's going to transfer the heat. And that solder flow should go fairly quickly. And there it goes. I'm just going to make sure it went all the way around. Now let's concentrate on the other side, on the other piece. Get your flame within about 1/4 of an inch of the plate, and there goes that one. Now this one's kind of hard to see. It's got a lot of black around in the flux, so it's going to be really hard to tell whether or not that's soldered all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and stick these in the pickle, and then we'll check them once they've been pickled. In the meantime, I'm going to move this over here, and we're going to put our 2 rings down. I'm going to go ahead and flux them at the openings. Now the rings are so small, it's kind of the whole ring actually. And I'm actually going to place my solder on the board and then put the ring on top of it because that'll be the easiest way to pull the solder through. Now I'm going to change my flame so it's a little bit smaller because these are some pretty small rings and I don't want to melt them. So I'm going to make it just a smidge smaller. I'm going to heat up the flux and then concentrate my heat. Try and get it in there pretty quickly, and you can see it kind of dropping and falling. There it goes. Same thing on that one. Let's move them. And that one's good. And I'll make sure that one went all the way through. There we go. Oh, I melted it just a little bit, but that's okay because I'm going to be filing part of it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to stick these into the pickle, and then when we take them out, we'll cut off the back plate and solder the rings to the top of the back plate. So I have my soldering out of the pickle, and I've got a nice silver ring all the way around. So this looks really good. So now I can take my jeweler saw and cut this out so that I can file it and make it smooth. So let's go ahead and cut those now. I'm leaving a little bit of an edge on there because I'm going to file it, and I want to be able to hold on to my tubing and not have it jump around. So I'm putting as much of it on the edge of my pin as I possibly can and just doing a little bit at a time. If you take your time with it, it's, oh, look at that, I broke a blade. Well, darn. See, even those of us who've been doing this for a very long time break blades. And I wouldn't be surprised if I broke more than just this one, considering it's been a very long time since I've been at the bench. So let's put my blade back in. It's the nice thing about these quick change saw frames. I can get a blade in pretty quickly. Okay, let's try this again. And since I've already got part of it cut through, I'm going to go ahead and just start from this side. If I can get it started. There we go. And cut that excess off. It's going to be a little bit harder to hold, but it'll make it just a smidge easier. I've never been good with the cutting shears, so I use my saw blade. If you have shears and it's easier for you to just trim around it that way, by all means do that. Part of the reason why my blade broke is because I was trying to force it to go around a curve that I wasn't turning, or I was turning too quickly. So I'm gonna take my time this time. So there's one. So you see I've got the back plate on there. It's wonky, but we'll fix that when we file it. And let's get this side done. Put a little bit more burlube on my blade. And just take your time with it. It's not a race. We're not in a hurry. I know I feel a little bit rushed right now, but that's just me. Take your time, just do a little bit at a time. And don't get your finger. I can feel it touching my finger, so I'm trying to be really careful. Because I have some permanent silver in my fingers from sawing and being too aggressive and sawing the silver right into my fingers, and I didn't get it cut out very well or cleaned out very well. So I have some permanent silver in my finger. You probably, there's a little black spot right there in my finger. That's silver underneath the skin that still hasn't made its way up to the surface. So it's my souvenir. Okay, so we've got these two cut out. Now I'm going to take a pair of pliers and my file, and file those down. I'm going to use my half round file. I found that the easiest way to hold these small pieces is with a pair of pliers, and since these are round pieces, I'm going to use my round pliers, my round nose pliers. I'm going to brace it on my bench and just slowly kind of work my way around to hide that solder seam. Whew. I'm just going to do it very gently, because I don't want to take off too much material to the point where my solder joint doesn't have anything to hold on to and it falls apart, because I will be doing another solder operation before this whole project is over. Okay, that's one done. Notice as I'm filing, I'm only going in the forward direction because that is the most effective way to use your file. So try not to seesaw it back and forth, because it really doesn't cut anything on the back slide. So the forward motion is where you get all of your work done. And what I'm looking for is just that little invisible mark where the solder seam should be. If you have it filed correctly, that seam will disappear. Now, once I'm done with the files, I can take my sanding stick from earlier and sand down any sharp edges. I'm going to do a little bit of texture on these with my burrs, so I'm not too concerned about the filing being perfectly clean. Meaning that there won't be any scratch marks on it. I want to take any of the rough edges off of it. I can do the same thing, use my pliers to hold it like this, take my filing stick, my sanding stick, and go around the edges, and that actually works a little bit easier. Boy, has it been a while. No more. Getting to the bench every day is my goal, so I can get projects out to you all faster. I'm gonna go ahead and do this one again. Now, if you're looking for a high shine finish, obviously you're going to spend a little bit more time on this step. I'm not looking for a high shine. I want it to be kind of a matte finish. And since I'm going to add a little texture using my burrs, I want to go ahead and just file the larger marks out of it and keep some of the smaller stuff. Okay, that's better. Much better. So here are the two rings that I soldered earlier. I am going to file a flat spot because what I would like to do is solder these rings to the top like this, And in order to do that, to get a good joint, I need to have a flat spot. So I'm going to take my file and a pair of pliers. I'll find my flat nose pliers. It works best if you have a pair of these parallel pliers because it's easier to hold the ring. And I'm going to file flat the section where the solder joint is, because I kind of want to hide the solder joint in the other solder joint for the second part. So I'm going to get my file out again, and I'm going to file a flat spot. I'm going to do it very gently. And I'm going to file about 1/3 of the way through the thickness of the wire. There's one. Okay, so those pieces are ready. Now what I want to do is clip off the ends of my porcupine quill. See? It's stuck in my finger. That is precisely why I want to cut the little barbs off. So I'm going to just take a tiny little piece off of each one of these. Now, I have porcupine quills. You can use feathers, you could use sticks, you could use any of your found objects. It doesn't necessarily have to be porcupine quills. They're just, it was an idea I had that I wanted to make a project with that kind of goes along with some of the other stuff that I've made earlier in my art career. And it was a good simple project for me to get started with this week. So now that all these little barbs are gone, it won't get stuck in my hair, it won't get stuck in my fingers, and I still have that little dark spot on the tips, which is what I was really going for. I like that little piece that has that darkened edge, kind of has a little bit of an ombre effect. So you can imagine if this was on a porcupine, how dangerous they could be. I know we've all seen pictures or videos of animals with porcupine quills in their face because they got a little bit too close and too curious. But I can attest, it's not fun. It's definitely an uncomfortable feeling. Okay, so all of those are done. Now we're going to go back to the soldering board and we're going to solder the 2 rings, or 1 ring to each one of the tops of these earrings. Okay, so now I've got my 2 soldered closed jump rings, my 2 end caps, and then I also cut 2 pieces of 21 gauge wire because I'm going to ball up the end because this is going to be my ear wire. So I'm going to get my torch started. This time I'm going to use easy solder. Let me get my Flux wet here again. And I'm going to use my 3rd hand to hold my ring on. I'm going to Flux if I can get a hold of it. Flux my end cap. It's so tiny. I'm going to use my tweezers. I'm going to place my ring, my 3rd hand, and I'm going to set it right on top. Now I'm checking to make sure that it's level. Let's move this out of the way so I don't accidentally melt that stuff. I have a couple of pieces of easy solder. I'm going to take out 1 for each piece. I'm going to pick solder this because that'll be easier than trying to place the solder on the piece. So here we go. Wish me luck. Okay, got my solder up. Now, because I have my ring in my 3rd hand, I need to put some heat on my ring. because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to solder this on. It's not going to stick. Oh, that went fast. Ooh, that went really fast. Goes to show you some of these smaller pieces are a little bit tricky. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to set that one aside for now. Now, to get the second one set up, I'm going to put some flux on it. Use my tweezers to set that one up. Let's get my ring in my third hand. Set that on there. That looks pretty good. Number 2. Oh, I dropped my solder. Oh. Okay, everything on my board is sticking to my pick. So much for cooperation on the board today. Okay. Ooh, that one went pretty fast too. Done. Wow. That was super duper fast. I'm going to quench that. It's sticking to my third hands because of the flux. I'm going to quench that. Looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is put that extra jump ring that I cut in it because that's going to be the hanger. So let's put that on there. I'm going to stick that in my third hand. Let's get that fluxed. Get another piece of easy solder. I'm going to get 2 pieces since I'm going to have 2 of them anyway. And we're going to pick solder that as well. Now this, I want to make sure that I'm aiming my heat away from where the other solder joint was. So I'm going to focus my heat up here. There it goes. That one's done. Let's quench that one. Then we'll stick that in the pickle. Let's get number 2 ready. Of course I would drop it. There it goes. Let's get that in the quench. Everything is out of the pickle now. So I'm going to do a little sanding cleanup on these, and then I'm going to add my texture with my burr, and I'll show you how to do that. And I'm going to start my ear wire, make a loop, a small loop. Got that started. I'm going to use the same technique I did earlier. I'm just going to hold this in my pliers and do a quick little sand around. I'm going to get on my jump ring as well. I'm getting around the top of the cap, top of my jump ring, make sure that it's all nice and clean. It's a nice thing about some of these small projects, they don't take as much to clean up. So that's one. You could also take and tumble this. I would tumble it for, about an hour or so with some steel shot and a little bit of soap, and that'll help clear up any of the matte finish that's on there, because that matte finish is the fine silver that's been brought to the surface from soldering. But to me, it's just a little bit easier to sand it off, and it takes less time. Okay, so those two are ready. Now I'm not going to worry about the inside so much, because what I'm actually going to do is glue these pieces in like this. So I may have to trim these down just a little bit more, and then get some super glue or some epoxy and glue them in. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you how I'm going to do texture. So I'm going to use this little 90-degree heart burr to put some texture in the outside of my tubing, because I want to give it a little bit extra sparkle, something a little interesting, and I'm going to use my Flux shaft to do that. Now, this is going to be fun to hold on to because it's so small, but it'll work. Now I am putting a little bit of burr lube on it. Okay, so I'm going to test the length of this, and that's kind of too long, so I'm going to actually trim these down just a little bit. I'm cutting off the opposite end because I want to keep that dark edge. And I'm not making them exactly the same length because I want them to seem just a little bit more organic. One thing that's interesting about porcupine quills is that they're hollow. So when you cut off the end, you're actually opening up the end. It's filled with calcium, kind of like a bird's feather. Okay, those are done. I can see I have a little bit more cleanup to do, but I'll do that off camera. Now I want to make my ear wire. So I've got my first loop here, and I always use a Sharpie for my ear wire, just because it's a consistent size. But before I bend it into the shape of the ear wire, I'm going to go ahead and attach the jump ring. Because it'll be a lot easier for me to hold on to while I bend it around the Sharpie. So there we go. had to get my hammer because I'm going to flatten the ear wire once I get it made. So I'm actually just going to take the end, and wrap it around. There's one. And there's two. So there are my two ear wires. Now all I need to do is take my hammer and flatten it just a little bit to kind of work harden it. I'm going to use this as my makeshift anvil. And essentially what I'm going to do is just hold the ear wire on the end and hammer it just a little bit. Okay. So now that's stiffened those up just a smidge so that they won't bend around. I need to trim off the excess wire because I don't want my ear wires to be that long. So what I'm going to do is stick them back on my Sharpie. Get them together. And then I'm going to trim off the excess. Now I'm going to take my pliers and just create a little bump on the end just to keep them from slipping out of the ear. And I'm going to take my sanding stick and sand off the burr from the cut so that when they go into the ear, it doesn't hurt. It's not sharp. You could also use a cut burr. A cut burr would work, but I don't have a cut burr this small. Oh, actually, I probably do. I just don't want to look for it. This is faster. Just because you have the tools doesn't mean you have to use them. Okay, so now my little earrings and the settings are ready. Now all I have to do is put a little epoxy in there and stick my porcupine quills in there. So let's do that. I'll probably get this last one in there. Yeah. Get this excess off of there. There we have it. A fun, simple little project, cute little different earrings, and you got some soldering practice in. So this week's project was all about making end caps and adding chain to the end caps to make some dangly earrings. I just happen to have porcupine quills, so I used those as my found object. However, you can use anything that you like, feathers, flowers, leaves, sticks, whatever you can find. Hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like if you did, and also don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Thank you for watching this week, and I will see you next week. Bye.